Honestly, here is my solemn pledge. If this podcast actually ends up producing a reasonable amount of income, I will use it specifically and strictly for procuring and maintaining another Suzuki Esteem. That car fucking ruled.
Are we saying that the Suzuki Esteem is the official car of Shawinigan Moments? Because, like, I'm not going to go and endorse my Hyundai Ioniq.
It's our Liam's van. I'll do bonus episodes about the condition of the Suzuki Esteem.
Okay, yeah, fine. I doubt we'll ever have enough to buy a Suzuki Esteem. How much do they go for? $5,000 now?
Well, I mean, I bought mine for $1,700 and a case of beer.
I don't think that's even legal anymore. I think, was this before the PST nonsense came into play in BC?
Yes.
That explains a lot. Because I tried to sell my cousin a car once, and they got rid of the loophole that allowed you to sell a car for $1 if they were like family or whatever. And he has the same last name as me, but the insurance place that was doing all the paperwork was like, yeah, no.
Yeah, even if you gift the car, you have to
pay the book
pay
value
PST.
or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
And it's based upon the blue book value, not the black book value, which is like the basically the scrap cost of it.
Oh.
So like you're paying on like what an ideal condition like car of that year is worth.
So just crush it.
Well, that's the fucking annoying thing, is that basically it's just gonna end up with a bunch of cars getting scrapped that are otherwise perfectly salvageable.
Hey, less cars out there means less cars on the road, and which means better traffic. Hey, I've solved traffic. I just make everybody crush their car.
Make owning a car prohibitively expensive. I mean, realistically, that's what fucking like all these the people who effectively just own Canada, like your Galen Westons and those sorts of people, like what they're gonna fucking end up doing. It's gonna be too expensive to own a car, so public transit will become the only option.
Yeah. Well, let's start this podcast, shall we?
Yeah, sure.
1, 2, 3.
Hello and welcome to the Shawinigan Moments podcast. My name is Heather and I use she, they pronouns.
My name is Tamarack and I use they, them, or its pronouns.
How are you, Tamarack?
I'm doing pretty good. I haven't spoken to you in so long.
I know, it's like I haven't spoken to you in a period of time.
Undisclosed period of time.
Exactly. I haven't gotten up to pour myself a glass of water and pet my cat and all that. Actually, she's just down next to me, that sort of thing.
I was going to leave it vague, but probably at some point I'm going to bring up that it is still Labor Day, or it's still May 1st.
Fair. And the sun is still out. That is one good thing we can say, at least, that we're not recording this well past our bedtimes.
Well past your bedtimes. I have a sleeping disorder. I don't have a bedtime.
That's fair. I have a very regulated sleep. Shall we do the news?
Nice.
What?
Yeah, let's do the news.
Fine. Let's do the news. All right, what do you got for me this time?
So, I have some good news.
Yeah?
We haven't had an overpass be hit by a semi-truck.
How long has it been since we've had a semi-truck hit an overpass in Vancouver?
I think it's been a good month.
Let me look this up real quick here, because overpass collision, Vancouver. Here we go. This is person on Twitter.
It's been almost a month.
Oh my god, we've gone almost a month? 12 days.
Has there been a more recent one?
I missed one 12 days ago. I thought I was on top of this. This is what I get for not going on Twitter anymore. But before you start, let's find out what hit the overpass this time. Let's see here. It happened on the Shaughnessy Elgin Road underpass in Poco, but there's no photos or anything. So, and then before that, it was 13 days. What was that? Oh
wow, we've been asleep at the wheel here.
Let's see here. 0 days, 21 hours. What hit this one here? Somebody suggested it was Chohan again. It's been a while since we've heard of Chohan, but I don't think they got their operating license back.
I don't believe so. Also, now's probably a good time to note that the official podcast policy is that we will continue dead naming Twitter as long as Elon keeps dead naming his daughter.
Yeah, that's fair. I think that's reasonable. Well, all right. It's been a while. It's been happening every once in a while. What happened this time for truck? Because it doesn't sound like an overpass got hit.
It was not an overpass, and it wasn't a solid this time, which I guess is kind of good. So you use GPS when you're driving, yeah?
Yeah, the sat nav is often enabled. I use Apple Maps, which is, for better or worse, maybe not. So Apple Maps has improved.
Yeah, it's definitely improved since the good old days. I've heard of, being told to drive straight up into space.
Did that actually happen?
Yeah, their 3D projections kind of put roads on vertical surfaces for a little bit.
Hell yeah, it's like F-Zero.
Yeah, exactly. And unfortunately, this particular driver on this particular F-Zero track mistook the speed boost. This was not a shortcut. From Burnaby Now, a semi-truck driver stuck in marina followed GPS down a boat ramp.
Oh dear, I'm just looking at this now, and
from a Sḵwx, right near where I grew up.
Fair enough. I thought we weren't going to disclose the general area where you grew up.
I grew up in undisclosed location in the interior of the province.
Yeah, fair enough.
Dear. So over the weekend, basically, a driver was just following a sat nav at night and followed it right off the fucking boat launch.
And of course, it's a driver from Surrey. This is where I grew up. I'm willing to tell you all where I grew up.
I mean, population-wise, Surrey is about as specific as somewhere vaguely in the interior of the province. Just
That's
not
fair.
In terms of, geographical area.
That's fair. So, this is not like the first time something like this has happened.
No.
I've heard so many instances of people doing this. It's not unheard of. I believe there have been situations where sat nav has directed people to drive on a bridge that would definitely crush under the load of a truck like this. And there's been other cases where sat nav has directed people to drive onto train tracks.
The train tracks one I haven't seen. I have seen there's a tram tunnel somewhere. I think it's either in Montreal or in Toronto.
It's in Toronto. It's a common occurrence. They have to it fucks so many things up because it's the is it Union? I think it's Union. What'll happen is every once in a while somebody will just drive into the tunnel and then get stuck, and then of course the streetcars just can't connect with the subway. Yeah, it's a really stupid situation.
Yes, grade separation good. Car continues to be bad.
Exactly.
The thing I like about this is this and the overpass strikes are they're things that are very tangibly relatable kind of disaster scenarios. Everybody's been led astray by GPS and kind of ended up taking a weird turn. Not to such disastrous consequences because they're not driving as large of a vehicle and probably haven't been driving for as long, but distracted driving is no joke. And yeah.
I was just thinking about the train track situation. I just remembered it happened not too long ago. There's the old BC Electric line that runs down along the Fraser River that's still in use, or I think it's actually gone dormant since. But when a Tesla with FSD, or I'm assuming it was FSD, drove right onto the track and got stuck. This was a couple weeks ago.
Oh, that is oof.
And Elon Musk wants semi-trucks to use FSD. Doesn't that terrify you? I mean, full self-driving, I should say.
Yeah, what if it was like a Tesla, except even bigger, heavier, and more capable of turning a child into paste?
And can catch on fire at will.
Oh yeah, I mean, I said it's like a Tesla.
That's fair. That goes without saying.
Elon Elon Musk jokingly sold a flamethrower to promote his digging company. However, he unironically sold a flamethrower by way of all of his fucking cars.
I've been in, like, I know we're deviating from talking about truck drivers driving into the water, but like I've been in a Tesla and I just don't understand how they get labeled as luxury when they feel like I'm inside of a not a PT Cruiser. What was that old Dodge Caliber? That's what it feels like to be inside of these cars. Like if you've ever,
Yeah.
The thing about the Dodge Caliber that made it nicer than a Tesla is a lot of them had a built-in fridge. What a piece of shit. Both cars are pieces of shit. But actually, you know what? Cars from that point in time, I will say, are equally as shitty as a Tesla that is made today in terms of build quality. And that is really bad because the car industry in the late 2000s was suffering. Like, obviously, they were hemorrhaging money because they went all in on shitty gas guzzling vehicles, and then all of a sudden the credit crunch comes in, and nobody can afford to fill the damn things or even let alone maintain them.
A thing that would not happen again.
Oh, we're barreling towards another catastrophe. I think it's a miracle that it hasn't played out yet, and I have to think that the pandemic played a role.
Yeah, my brother very stupidly recently got another yet larger truck, and I'm glad he doesn't listen to this podcast.
The thing that I always tell people is that people who buy large vehicles today kind of don't really have an option now, because if you want to buy a new vehicle, it's going to have that child killing, meter high bumper scenario anyway. And like, if you can't go out and buy a Dodge Caravan anymore. Like, they still make them, but they're not the status vehicle that they were in the 90s. Like, all families in the
Caravan,
90s had a
the
Dodge
fucking minivan.
Well, not a status symbol, I should say, but it was like that was the vehicle that middle class people would buy. Like, my parents had a Plymouth Voyager to upgrade from a Dodge Cavalier, a Chevrolet Cavalier. Which,
fair.
Yeah, which I mentioned a couple episodes ago.
Yeah, my mom drove a GMC Safari van.
Yeah, and that was like the competitor to the Dodge Caravan. So, like, the cars today are just, they exist not because of the consumer market necessarily, but because, well, the United States came up with all these regulations around emissions, and then the automakers went, well, if we build vehicles bigger, we don't have to conform to them, which is why we have trucks that can murder children just by, hitting them. Like, it's terrifying. Like, every time I see a new vehicle on the road and I see how high up I just hope that if I get hit by one of these vehicles with the meter high bumper, that like the death is instantaneous, because it's just horrifying to see these vehicles on the road.
Yeah, I mean, I got into a nasty bike accident with a fucking like Ford, like one of their like cargo van things, like the delivery vans.
At least those have a bumper or like a overall front frame that isn't that high up.
Well, I was on a bike, so I went over the hood, but normally I wouldn't have.
Right. Christ, I fucking hate new cars.
Yeah. Anyway, to round out this rambling, some of which may have been cut out, there is a way that we can transport goods en masse all over the country that doesn't require a bunch of sleep-deprived, underpaid drivers to drive into ditches or drive down boat launches and also hit overpasses. It's called a fucking train.
Yeah,
the loading gauge. Like, these things trains have unified loading gauge, standardized containers.
Well, yes, the standardized containers is not reflect. I don't think, you know what, at some point we're going to talk about the railroads, and I don't think we're going to get into how
we're coming for you, Canadian Pacific.
It's going to be like a 5-part episode, I swear, because like this is a 3-part episode. Hopefully it's 3 parts. I haven't finished the episode for part 3 yet, but I'm pretty certain it'll be 3-parter.
Let's look at that script, shall we?
No, you will not look at that script just yet. Well, I mean, I think,
I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see. I think we should move on, unless there's something else you want to add to this.
No. Ban all cars. Build a fucking train. This country was built on rails.
I have opinions on
And
what you just said, but you and I have had many alcohol-induced conversations about this topic.
this country was built on rails and genocide. That's the two things we got. That's the only two things we got.
That's the thing that makes me so sad. All right. So I'm not replaying the clip from the last episode because if you haven't heard it already, that means you didn't listen to the last episode. And thus, you should go back.
Last episode.
Yes, please play part 1 and then play part 2. So this is your opportunity to hit pause. And now that you're back, you can listen to this episode.
Although maybe we should like maybe I'll add an introduction of like fucking vault tech, better living underground or whatever. That'll fit into 15 seconds.
The fuck is this? Vault-Tec? Oh, no. Wait till we get to the end.
Okay.
No,
well,
yeah, wait.
we'll put that clip somewhere because I want to talk about some things. But first, this is your episode.
Yes. You should save that for a Deep and Bunker episode.
I do want to make a Deep and Bunker episode.
We'll make that a bonus episode.
I will. Fine. Well,
Okay.
I mean, I'll comment on it here and plug a potential future bonus episode.
All right. So at the end of the last episode, we left off talking about Billy Bishop and how he destroyed the Eaton department store chain, and but also Canada received an imperial gift from Great Britain after the end of the war. This meant that more airplanes were available for civilian and defense purposes. In June 1919, Parliament passed an act which formed the Air Board, which regulated the use of airplanes and other flying machines in Canada. They were tasked with controlling civil aviation and performing air defense, meaning it was the precursor to the Royal Canadian Air Force.
Like, as we know it, as a like effectively self-defense force.
Yeah, so its use was a little bit all over the place initially, but Canada was the first country in the world to pass legislation around the activity of flying. And the Air Board itself was responsible for managing the airplanes given to the country. The other thing the Air Board was tasked with, which is what you were talking about, was the planes were used for like forestry, photograph surveying, and anti-smuggling patrols.
Why would they need to do anti-smuggling patrols in early 1920s Canada?
I don't know.
Why would that be a thing?
This also meant the creation of civil aviation facilities, with 5 in 1920 initially, and a few more as the years went on. This one's a little bit of a side note, but this also created the Royal Canadian Air Force's base Jericho Beach,
Yeah.
of which I bring up because we're here in Vancouver, and it is today home to a rather nice place to hang out in the summer. Pretty much every summer I try and go out there, and parking is a nightmare, but it's a lovely place to hang out.
We should just bike. It's an easy bike ride once you're off the Central Valley Greenway.
Last summer I was not able to do it, but you're correct.
Bonus episode. We just fuck off to the beach.
You gotta stop suggesting bonus episodes on the recordings.
No.
It was, however, considered for a full-fledged airport at one point, and also a deep sea port. There was like a plan to build. Yeah, I kid you not. So I don't have the details written here, but for the deep sea port in particular. But what I do know is there was a plan to build a railway from where the railway line that goes up the Arbutus Cut that's no longer there. That was intended to also split off and go around what is now Wreck Beach and then meet up with Jericho Beach. And the idea was there was a London-based company that wanted to build a deep sea port at Jericho Beach.
I see. And they never decided to depth gauge the beach.
Well, they would have probably dredged the fuck out of it.
Oh, they would have had to.
Yeah, well, you got to do that with any port, but the thing is that it's a rather sheltered area to begin with. It can get rather rough there, but not to the point of say if you're going to go build a deep sea port in Tofino.
Yeah, okay, fair. I suppose it's one of those things where this was the age where being sheltered was more important than than being like easily navigable.
Yeah, that's part of the reason why they're building that giant port out in Roberts Brank, or rather, they did build one there, and now they're expanding it.
Yeah.
The Air Board eventually created the Canadian Air Force, and its first official base was at Camp Borden, originally built in 1916, now CFB Borden. It's now no longer an Air Force base. And I'm going to make this clear before you interject, it is named for a former defense minister and not a prime minister.
Is it the same guy?
No. This was a defense minister. I think it was a Liberal defense minister. I just can't remember which cabinet he served under.
Okay.
Yeah. By 1923, the Air Board was amalgamated with the Department of Militia and Defense and the Department of Naval Services to form the Department of National Defense. This results in the creation of the Royal Canadian Air Force. Something I should add, during World War I, the Canadian Air Force was created in 1918, but it was disbanded in 1920 due to them being stationed in the United Kingdom, and it was now peacetime. So demands for air defense were seen as unnecessary.
Yeah, what are we going to use like aircraft for in peacetime?
I don't know. What are we going to do with aircraft?
Yeah.
Like, what is flying?
Yeah, what is, like, look, if there's not a war on, we're not going to bother. It's like how everybody plays Hearts of Iron.
This does not create a unified command, I must add. That doesn't happen for another 40 years. So it was 1960-something when the Royal Canadian Air Force and the Royal Canadian Navy, as well as the Canadian Army, note Canadian Army, not Royal Canadian Army, was merged into the Canadian Armed Forces. This didn't happen until the 1960s. The use of Royal appended to the Canadian Air Forces was only because Canada saw its sister Dominion, Australia, take on the word in its Air Force name and decided that it wanted in on it too, and King George V said, whatever.
Ah, yes. It's the like post-Great Patriotic War Guards divisions kind of bullshit of like, well, it sounds cool. It makes us feel nice.
Only the Navy and the Air Force got royal. The Army did not.
They knew what they did.
I cannot wait for the Royal Canadian Space Force.
Oh my fucking god. You had to remind me.
I just like the idea of having the Royal Canadian Air Force, the Royal Canadian Navy, the Canadian Army, and the Royal Canadian Space Force. The Canadian Army is just going to always get the dregs.
I mean, to be fair, that was their experience at the Somme, so...
Staying in 1920... Staying in 1920, the first passenger flight was made between Winnipeg and the Pass, which is about 500 kilometers northwest, excuse me. This was for a fur trader working for the Hudson's Bay Company, I believe.
Sorry. Worst fucking skit, but still lives rent-free in my head.
Christ. By 1926, it would take about 6 days to fly from Montreal to Vancouver. I think that's faster than taking plane at that point. Taking a train, but don't quote me on that. It might be actually slower. In the same year, the RCAF seized control over non-military aviation, and this responsibility was handed over to a new branch called the Civil Government Air Operations, or CGAO, which the RCAF supported until the government of William Lyon Mackenzie King.
Your boy.
Created the Department of Transport in 1935.
One of his kind of good moves.
Yeah, that we have. Well, it's now called Transport Canada, but the Department of Transport still is, I guess, the official name. During this time, airplanes were being built in Canada. Shipbuilder Canadian Vickers ventured into aircraft manufacturing in 1923 when it won a contract to supply seaplanes or flying boats to the RCAF. This is going to be funny, but all of its plane designs were given names such as Vancouver, Vanessa, Varuna, Vedette, Velos, Vigil, and Vista.
Yeah. The flying boats were also fucking amazing.
They were cool, and their design stuck around for a long time. They worked. It also licensed builds of other planes, including a little British company called Avro, but also a German Fokker.
The King's Return.
I know. We're gonna be talking about Avro a little bit more in this episode. We only mentioned Avro a couple times in the last episode, but it is what it is. De Havilland Aircraft of Canada was formed in 1928, and it still survives to this very day, despite its original parent company being no more. They largely built DH-82 Tiger Moths for the RCAF. They would also go on to build Canada's first orbiting satellite, the lwətaʔ.
Oh, that's a funny name for it.
Hey, remember, we got a whole football team that are called the Alouettes.
Yeah, but it's a Canadian football team that's called the Alouettes. Specifically a Canadian hand egg team.
Hey, you know what? Sure. Whatever. By 1927, the importance of airways was quite apparent, and a system of airports were proposed. What the proposal included was every 160 kilometers would have a major airport, with emergency landing strips every 50 kilometers or so across the entirety of the country.
That is ridiculously dense if you understand the geography of Canada.
Well, it's not so bad if you're dealing with just flat surfaces. So, like, if you're going across, like, Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta, it's flat enough. It's like where it starts to suck ass is anywhere like west of Jasper.
Yeah, pretty much. It's like, hey, let's build an airport every 160 kilometer. Famous words of person who has never seen British Columbia.
Well, like, one of the sketchiest airports I've had the pleasure of landing was in Trail.
Yeah, oh, that's a good one.
No, wait, sorry, it wasn't Trail. It was Castlegar. Castlegar's to the north of it. I always cross the two up because they're not too far apart. But, like, it's not the sketchiest airport I've ever landed in. In fact, the sketchiest airport is not even in this country. But, like, as you're landing, you get pretty close to it. And, like, I was flying in, some sort of turboprop. I can't even remember anymore. It was like some sort of whatever Air Canada uses for turboprops.
Crash 8 probably, or Dash 8.
Crash 8? Is that the nickname for them?
Yeah, it's I think it's actually I think it's a de Havilland project. Well, now they're made by Bombardier.
Yeah, Bombardier definitely. Well,
yeah, it's de Havilland Canada Dash 8s.
Well, there you go. So I've had the pleasure of flying in one of those into Castlegar, and like you do, like make some interesting turns. Like you're not that far from the mountains. There's not much space there. The sketchiest airport that I have done, I did this in, I think it was a 737. I was flying from Lima to Cusco in Peru, and you're landing at an airport in the Andes, which is like the airport's like runway elevation is something like 3,500 meters. So that should give you an idea of like how fucked up it was to land here. Like it's a miracle that they have like this plateau at this elevation. It's also a miracle that the plane can take off. Like the air is super thin there. Like I was trying to go to the bathroom at one point when I was staying at a hotel in Cusco, and just getting out of bed will just exhaust you. And that's even with all of the altitude sickness pills I was taking.
Wow.
Yeah. Flying around mountains is fucking scary. Like there's like flying over it's fine, but flying through them, terrifying. Like you're not even able to fly a plane over the Himalayas. It's like it's considered not safe to fly an airplane over them.
Well, also because if you went down around there, rescue would be damn near impossible.
Well,
like,
yeah,
the Hindu Kush mountains are like famously impossible to traverse. They're very difficult to traverse, rather.
Well, you can just imagine they can have a situation like that. Was it that Argentinian football team?
Yeah.
Not terrifying. Airports were given modern amenities such as navigation beacons, as well as navigational and runway lighting. Important. Many of the airports were also created during the Great Depression. By decades passing, the airway system, as it was called, stretched a distance of 5,000 kilometers, enabling one to fly from Vancouver to Sydney, Nova Scotia. Despite this, the first cross-country flight did not occur until 1949.
Took a while, but also, like, how many Vancouverites have regular business in Sydney, Nova Scotia?
I used to fly to Halifax a couple times a year for work.
I mean, it's a good place to visit, but I don't know if in 1949 that was a thing people were really doing.
I would say that
cross-country commerce wasn't as big of a deal.
No, and that's definitely something in the future we may end up talking about. But like Halifax was a much busier city in this time period than it was, rather than what it is today. So
yeah, my comment is more the opposite. Is that basically most of the major centers in Western Canada are very much post-war inventions.
That's true. Actually, going to that, the system would eventually be expanded to allow flight from Edmonton to the far reaches of the territories. One thing you may have noticed, I haven't dropped any words about Newfoundland. Newfoundland did not join the country until 1949.
Yeah, that should be. I would hope everyone who's a Canadian listening who paid some attention in socials was aware of that.
You'd be surprised. A lot of people don't realize it's actually called Newfoundland and Labrador, hence why it's NL on our addresses. But they didn't join Confederation until 1949, and it was the last province to do so.
It's the one time that somebody built a train and got burned for it.
That's a future topic.
Historic Canada, please do a Newfoundland's bankruptcy episode so we can talk
Well,
about
that's
it.
the reason why they joined the Confederation. They were bankrupt,
Yes.
and the United Kingdom was like, no, we're not doing anything. You're now Canada.
Yeah, they didn't join us so much as we bought them.
They had a cooler flag prior to Confederation. It looked like Neapolitan ice cream.
Okay, but they still have the coolest flag.
They do have a cool flag now, and they had a cool flag then.
Excuse me? The coolest.
Fine, I'll agree with you. Although I will say that I am partial to New Brunswick's flag.
Excuse me? The coolest. It's the coolest flag. Come on.
I know I said I'm getting tired of hearing about bonus episodes, but I think we're going to have to discuss the fucking... Wait, we do have an episode on flags in the future. Hell yeah, I just realized this. We can talk about our problem with the Canadian flags in that episode.
Okay, at the very least, Ontario has the worst one.
So does Manitoba.
Yeah, they're tied for worst. Ontario had it
they're practically
first.
the same.
Yeah. Would that make Manitoba the worst one? Because they got it, like, Ontario already had the shit flag, and they decided, yeah,
No. When we get to the episode about the Canadian flag, this will become an actual topic, because I already know, like, I already have planned around talking about why Manitoba and Ontario have the flag that they do, and those flags are not an invention of anything prior to the 1950s.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so we'll get into that at some point. By 1928, the first woman to receive a pilot's license had happened. Eileen Volek of Weirton, Ontario. Finally a place in Ontario that's not named after somewhere in England. Hold on a second.
Isn't it?
Oh, hold on a sec. Thank God it's not. Okay, cool. We have to double check this, because I'm about to run my mouth here, and it's the only place name that seems to exist. If it exists elsewhere in the world, that's fine. It's just place names in England we care about. Going back, Eileen Volek of Weirton, Ontario, received her license when she was 19. However, this is a product of its time. Men could get their license as early as being 17 years old, but she was told to wait until she was 19 because the government didn't think she could fly due to her gender.
Flying ability is stored within the balls.
Oh.
I thought everybody knew that.
No, I didn't. I guess I won't be able to fly a plane. On March 13th, 1928, she flew.
You told me last episode you're too terrified to go into a hot air balloon. You're never going to fly a plane.
Hey, listen, you never know. I still fly on a fucking plane every once in a while. Like, you and I are probably flying this August together.
Don't remind me. I am legitimately actually afraid of flying.
We'll do our best, because, yeah. On March 13th, 1928, she flew a Curtiss Jenny to become the 77th licensed pilot in Canada. The test involved making 4 landings from 1,500 feet elevation to land within 150 feet of a designated point on the ground.
I just want to interject that as much as I've been poo-pooing aircraft, the Curtiss Jenny is a very, very attractive looking plane. It's very handsome.
Yeah, it looks really straightforward. It's a simple plane. It has it's a biplane. So there you go. It has two wings. Also, it required an additional landing with the motor off, so you have to use it as a glider, and land within 5,000 feet of a designated point. She also had to perform 5 figure-8 turns before 2 designated points. And additionally, she had to fly 175 miles or 280 kilometers cross-country. I'm assuming cross-country means fly in a direct path? I don't know.
Probably.
Yeah, it's a little. I'm not a pilot. I don't know. Plane nerds are probably going to be ripping into this and being like, "What the fuck is she on about?" or some shit. Any event, her height at 5 feet tall, or a meter and a half, required her to sit on a cushion.
Nice.
There was a thing in the 60s when they were designing fighter jets and all that, and well, I don't think we're going to talk about it in the next episode anyway. Where they discovered that using average heights and everything for that was actually a really disastrous idea. So
yeah, the average, I think it's like the average height of like at least like an American like army airman was like surprisingly short, just due to weird coincidence of selection.
Yeah. One other thing, she was friends with Amelia Earhart.
All these folks were like friends.
Yeah, there wasn't that many pilots, and I guess like being the first Canadian woman to receive a pilot's license would gather the attention of someone of the likes of Amelia Earhart.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, whatever happened to her?
What did ever happen to her? Stay tuned for our Amelia Earhart episode.
Fuck off. There's never going to be an Amelia Earhart episode.
No, she was afflicted by a terrible illness of not being Canadian.
Exactly. While many of the airstrips were built in the Great Depression, the federal government avoided spending excess money on aviation itself. For example, while Royal Mail Canada, the precursor to Canada Post, had been sending express mail from an aerodrome outside of Toronto in 1928, austerity led to them cutting airmail contracts and created financial struggles for small aviation companies. This would never happen again to Canada Post.
We did airmail before the Americans?
When did the Americans do airmail? I didn't bother looking into that.
Airmail scandal of 1934.
That's wild.
We did it first. We were the first to do airmail then, because I think the airmail scandal was in the 1930s.
Huh. I did not know that. The thing is, I wasn't really doing a lot of checks on what the Americans were up to because this is a Canada podcast. Although, well, during this time, Canada found itself without a national policy for the development of commercial aviation within its borders. Much of the domestic flying was limited to bush flying from airstrips near railways, so the railways and the airplanes were tied together, something that makes a lot of fucking sense, but for whatever reason, we don't do that today.
Yeah. Also, like, just like in Transport Fever, where you have a unit train filled with coal, and then you go and shovel it onto an airplane.
You could put oil on a plane in Transport Fever.
Yes.
I think you can do that in OpenTTD as well.
I haven't played OpenTTD, but yeah.
These are games that you play. Like, these are games I got stupid familiar with when the pandemic lockdowns were real bad. And I was like, well, I'm going to have to learn how to do transport, I guess. Going back to what we're talking about here, Imperial, like an example of where the commercial aviation was not really working out was Imperial Airways of Great Britain, which was the precursor to British Overseas Air Company. I think it's BOAC, which later then merged with another airline to become British Airways. Had no means of having passengers who are flying to Canada to connect elsewhere, and so as a result, they had to rely on Pan American, aka Pan Am, Airways of the United States to further their journey. One little note, and this actually is something I feel like would be fun to talk as a bonus episode at some point, is the Canadian Pacific Railway, as early as 1920, wanted to form its own airline.
Yes.
They did eventually.
They got their dream, which again, I cannot stress enough. CPR, we are coming for you.
It's actually it's no longer CPR. It's it's CPKC because it's Canadian Pacific Kansas City.
Yeah, it's Canadian Pacific. We are doing Tim Hortons imperialism and slowly buying up everything that you hold dear.
Well, I don't know how the ownership structure works, but they're still incorporated in Canada and headquartered there.
Yeah, Byzantine, as all these companies tend to be.
In 1926, Western Canada Airways was formed, and in 1933, United Air Transport, aka UAT, was formed. UAT was important because it would later be merged into Canadian Pacific Airlines, which was run by Canadian Pacific Railways.
Hell yeah!
TransCanada Airlines, TransCanada Airlines was also formed in this interim, which later would become Air Canada and would eventually gobble up Canadian Airlines, which was formerly Canadian Pacific Railways Airline.
And that merger definitely worked out great for everybody.
Yeah, we love Air Canada. In fact, the thing is like if I had to pick between WestJet and Air Canada, I'm going to pick Air Canada.
Yeah. To fly locally within province, not Air Canada because it's just more expensive. But like, yeah, if you're going any distance, like WestJet seats suck.
That's part of it. Like, I've never had a good experience sitting on a WestJet seat. Like, the last time I flew WestJet willingly, like, I chose to do so, I was flying from, of all places, Las Vegas back to Vancouver. Like, and like, I sat in the seat and I was like, why did I do this to myself? And the only reason why I did it is because I needed a last minute flight to Vegas, which, if you know me, you know I'm going there on pure duress. It was not a good time. Like, WestJet's service is fine. There's nothing inherently wrong with it. It's just, the seats are awful, and
it's a commuter airline. That's its bread and butter.
Yeah, like at least it's not Greyhound Air. That's a reference. The Great Depression was not kind to the RCAF as cuts to military spending affected airfield construction. Pilot training was also reduced, aircraft purchases were also cut, and operational activities were reduced. Despite this, auxiliary squadrons were formed in the 1930s. Priorities were increasing focus on military operations over anything civilian. The damage inflicted by the lack of funding left the RCAF really not all that important as a military force by the end of the 1930s. This would become important to address when a certain German painter turned dictator decided that Poland needed to be straightened out.
Oh, that's a way to phrase it.
I just don't want to say. It's like, how else do I reference this? It's like fucking like there is so much we can talk about in reference to what was happening in Germany in the 1930s.
Yeah, Poland done got partitioned.
Poland was made part of Germany without their consent.
Yeah. Anyway, moving on.
So now it's World War II. Did you know that the last war to end all wars was not the last war to end all wars?
Well, it was the war to end all wars, but not this one, or the next one, or Vietnam, or either the Gulf Wars, the war in Afghanistan, and the other war in Afghanistan.
Yeah. So now it's World War II. As quickly as Canada entered the war in 1939 on its own abolition this time around.
That was primarily symbolic, it is worth saying.
Well, at this point, the Act of Westminster had already passed. The Statute of Westminster had already passed, and Canada was actually able to make its own military decisions. But Canada's ties back to Great Britain were a lot different in the 1930s than they are today.
Very much so. Like, this was a war that we were always going to join, much to the chagrin of the French-Canadian population at the time. Although one invasion of France later really changed their tune on that one in particular.
And yeah, in both wars, the Americans show up late, so, you know.
As they do.
It, alongside the UK, Australia, and New Zealand, agreed to jointly train aircrew for wartime service through the British Commonwealth Air Training Plan. Popular with the William Lyon Mackenzie King government.
Your boy.
Popular with him at the time, it was seen as a boon to keeping as many Canadians at home during the war effort. In addition to training pilots, it also included the training of engineering, maintenance, radio, gunnery, and bombing, to the tune of 130,000 total persons.
Yeah, they weren't going to skip on maintenance. They saw what happened to the guys in the last episode.
Yeah, they knew it was going to happen. They're not Boeing.
Yeah, they don't want to make their lives faint.
This also resulted in training for persons outside of ANZCA UK, not ANZAC. Anscock? No, that doesn't roll off the tongue. That doesn't roll off the tongue well.
Isn't it usually like Kanzak?
No, it was. The thing I was reading said ANZCA UK.
That's so cursed.
I know, it looks so awful. We'll just say the English-speaking Commonwealth. So outside the English-speaking Commonwealth, It included like countries as well as Belgium, France, Finland, the Netherlands, and the United States.
Yes,
But
a lot of
but
let's talk about some good guys.
Okay.
Let's talk about the troops.
Billy Bishop.
He's back.
He's back. He's making a return for another episode. He's now an
air. Does he fight this time?
He does not. He is now an air marshal for the RCAF. Because of his clout, he led a clandestine operation to recruit Americans, while the United States was still politically neutral.
Yeah, that was an avenue for a lot of Americans who went to fight early in the war, was like hooking up with the RCAF or hooking up with expeditionaries. No,
I don't know if I don't know really how to talk about that subject in particular, because this sort of stuff is really foreign to me, because I never really spent a lot of time studying around like military stuff. It's not my strong suit. But what I was going to mention is, and this is something I'd love to talk about and find an excuse for, and Historica Canada will never do a moment about this, but clandestine operations while the Americans were neutral also happened in the First World War. And one famous example is where the British Columbia government bought, I think it was like 2 or 3 submarines from a wharf in Seattle that were originally supposed to go to Chile. And so for a brief period of time, the provincial government of British Columbia illegally had a military.
Ah, yes. Bring back the fucking like British Columbia militia navy.
Well, so I don't know the specifics off the top of my head, but there was like a lot of...
We could station them in a Sዄwx.
Pray tell, how do you get a submarine to a Sºwx?
I was more referencing our news story.
I know, but like, how would you get like into these? They're not small.
Yeah, but one of our listeners is now Googling like how can you get to a Sŭwx from the sea? Technically, but
yeah, with
really.
Climate change and like a bunch of comets hitting the ocean, possibly.
It's navigable a large portion of the way, but you hit a problem when you hit the Sŭwx part of the journey.
If you can get a submarine through Fraser Canyon, I will give you $1 million.
Well, you wouldn't go through Fraser Canyon; we'd go up the Columbia.
Is the Columbia even deep enough to have a proper submarine?
Not underwater, no. But these aren't submarines. These are like Untersee boats. These are boats that can go underwater.
Good fucking lord! I'm pretty certain that you're going to like run across. Like, actually, no. There's actually one big reason why you'll never get a submarine up the Columbia.
What?
There's like too many fucking dams on it.
Oh yeah, there's a bajillion dams, but were there in the 1930s? I guess, yeah, that would have already been New Deal shit.
Yes.
Fair.
So, anyway, Billy Bishop had, done what he had done. So, going back to what we were talking about, many were trained on the previously mentioned Tiger Moth planes before graduating to more modern aircraft. Canada was the primary focus of the project due to its hospitable climate, being neighbors to the American industrial centers, lack of enemy aircraft being able to get deep into the country, and also being close enough to the European theater of war.
Yeah, being able to train like in southern Ontario, in northern Ontario, and also crucially in the prairies was a huge boon, because it covered most of what you would come across in the European theater.
Yeah, and also Australia is too fucking far to go do any of this work.
Well, Australia is also filled with like flora and fauna that want to kill you.
It's not that bad. This resulted in thousands upon thousands of buildings being built for aerospace use. That included things like fuel tanks, new water mains, and sewage systems as well, and a lot of other supporting infrastructure. Now, going back to what you were just talking about, one airport of note for Tamarack and I is Boundary Bay Airport. That was actually built to train pilots on Tiger Moths, and as well Abbotsford International Airport.
Yeah, that's what exactly this is like. How do we train people to fly near like really tall, jaggedy mountains? Oh, just build a fucking airport for training out in like the Fraser Valley.
Home defense was split between 2 commands, Western and Eastern. The Eastern Command was to protect the coast of the Atlantic, including defending against German U-boats and keeping shipping lanes open. So remember in our Blue Nose episode, we were talking about German U-boats. That's what I was making reference to.
Yes, they're very dangerous to all of your schooners.
The Western Command was lighter until the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. When the attack had occurred, it resulted in a larger squadron being deployed to the west, including defense of the Aleutian Islands.
Defense with an asterisk on it.
Yeah, the Aleutian Islands in World War II were, yeah.
What if there's a war going on, but only one side participates at a time?
Well, that's actually kind of where we get into the Japanese Fugo balloon bombs, which actually were a problem. Only one of them was ever successful. These Japanese Fugo bombs were basically hot air balloons that were they hot air or helium balloons or hydrogen? There was something anyway. These were just sent across the ocean, and only one was ever successful, and that was when it killed people in Florence, Oregon, somewhere in Oregon in 1945. That said, there's probably a whole bunch of them kicking around in BC. There was one found in Lumbee in 2014 and another one in McBride in 2019. And it's a little terrifying because McBride and Lumbee are fairly inland.
Yeah, well, that would have been their fate if they didn't actually like detonate or like activate as they should have. They probably would have just drifted until they hit something.
Yeah, and like Lumbee is like McBride is like an hour's drive from the Alberta border, and Lumbee is like 30 minutes outside of Kelowna.
Yeah, it's like deep in the interior, actually a little ways north of Soyuz.
There you go. You can take a submarine to Lumbee.
No, you can take a Fugo to Lumbee. Your submarine's probably going to get stuck at one of the dams in the Columbia.
That's fair. When the Soviet Union, this new country that we haven't mentioned at all in this episode, that's suddenly rather cool with everyone in the West, needed assistance, the creation of the Northwest Staging Route permitted support to the Soviets from Americans with assistance from Canada via landing strips and communication towers in British Columbia and Yukon. This is the same program that led to the construction of the Alaskan Highway.
Yeah, and obviously this would be a bridge that we would build to our comrades in the Soviet Union that would be everlasting and result in a prolonged peace between our peoples after having faced this common foe.
Hey, how's that bridge being built across the Bering Strait going?
As good as every other Soviet mega project. Actually, the Bering Strait Bridge was us, wasn't it?
No, the Russians tend to propose it every once in a while. And so have the Chinese. The Chinese wanted to, like about 10 years ago, build a maglev system over it.
Oh, were we going to get roped into Belt and Road? That would have been sick.
I don't know how I feel about a maglev being built through the Arctic Circle.
Okay, all right. Look, listen to me. Like
also,
counterpoint.
I'm gonna make
counterpoint.
Okay, fine. I'll listen. I'll make my argument.
Train from Vancouver to Bruges via the Trans-Siberian Railroad.
You realize there's gauge changes that have to happen, right?
Oh, at least like 20 of them, yes.
Yeah, sure. No, I was going to make the counterpoint is that the idea of building a maglev is stupid because that should be what you build after you run out of space to build high-speed rail.
Yeah, but I'm assuming it was probably part of the whole like Chinese like mega project blitz that gave them all their high-speed rail.
Yeah, they just had to do something with all the money they had, right? Otherwise, the money train would run out.
Yeah, capitalism is kind of a weird system like that.
Yeah. The RCAF ended up playing an important role in the Battle of Britain, where in the summer and early autumn of 1940, the Germans attacked the United Kingdom in an effort to force an early peace. This does overlap with the Blitz, but the Battle of Britain and the Blitz are kind of separate. That's the whole thing. Previously,
the Blitz was when they just gave up and stopped sending fighters.
Yeah, they just started bombing the shit out of London, practically.
Yeah.
The previously mentioned protection of shipping routes in the Battle of the Atlantic, which included many fights over the mid-Atlantic. The Battle of Normandy, which ended German occupation in Western Europe in the summer of 1944. And they also provided support in North Africa, Southern Europe, as well as India and what is now Sri Lanka, formerly Ceylon. The RCAF were bombing the shit out of the Germans quite heavily by just 2 years into the war, thanks to the Number 6 Group, which is based out of Allerton Park in North Yorkshire. At its peak, they had 14 squadrons scattered about in all of Yorkshire across 10 different RAF stations. Like, they were really close to each other. Like, they were barely 20 minutes drive from each other. On one particular campaign in 1944, 147 bombers were ordered to take off, but 3 could not. 17 were turned back just as they were over the North Sea, and 9 were shut down. The next night, 125 bombers were then ordered to do the same. 11 failed to take off, 12 turned back, and 24 were shot down.
And this is with all that money spent on maintenance that, reliability is an issue still.
It's war as hell.
Well, I mean, the fail to take off is just, maintenance concerns, safety check fails, stuff like that.
Yeah, and plus, you only have so many airplanes, so you're going to take risks and hope that nothing bad happens, right?
Yeah, it's if there's a risk that a door is going to blow off when you're just carrying, I don't know, a bunch of passengers on a commuter flight versus, a bunch of high explosive bombs, you want to err on the side of safety.
Poor leadership was cited as the reasons for the failure of the campaign and the obvious lower morale. So new leadership was brought in, and the group changed its tactics to target France, which was much closer than to fly to than Berlin. I noticed earlier I did not mention that the campaign was to fly all the way to Berlin, but that's what they were doing. Yes. It was actually, going back, because I realized I messed up what I was trying to say, is that they changed their tactics to just go and bomb France and not fly to Berlin. But this allowed Canada to lay the groundwork for Operation Overlord, which was the Battle of Normandy, as previously mentioned.
You mean it wasn't Canada didn't lay the groundwork for Operation Overlord by getting massacred at Dieppe? I thought it was Dieppe that did it. Historic Canada, you cowards, do a Dieppe episode.
The Dieppe raid was 2 years prior, though. Yeah, so by the end of World War II, nearly 10,000 Canadian bombers were dead. However, the world was finally at peace, and since it was now peacetime, we did not need a big pesky military occupying a large portion of the Canadian budget.
This is definitely the last time that this thing that has already happened will happen.
Canada was the 4th largest air force in the world, just to put things in perspective. It was also one of the largest navies, too, at this point.
We were the 2nd or 3rd largest navy also, but most of that was small ships that we inherited from various surrendered nations and a lot of convoy escorts. It wasn't a powerful empire projecting navy, but it was very big.
Yeah, spoils of war.
What was it spoils so much? Because I think a lot of them were retired, surplus British ships that they couldn't bother to maintain at wartime, stuff like that.
The British Commonwealth Air Training Plan, as mentioned earlier, which was used to train all of these pilots and everybody associated with them, was discontinued. All ranks of the RCAF were initially cut by 25%, but then by 90%. By 1947, the RCAF went from 250,000 persons strong to 12,000.
That's a bit of a downsize.
That's a bit of a cut.
Then again, this is post-war Canada, so all those people got good union factory jobs and probably did okay.
And also, they went from 50 squadrons to 5.
As you'd expect, I mean.
Yeah, it's peacetime.
Yeah.
In the same year, the RCAF got their first helicopters, which served in training and search and rescue operations. We haven't mentioned helicopters simply because they just didn't really exist until this point, and fundamentally, they work the same way as airplanes. The RCAF also provided support for expeditions to the Arctic.
Which is still kind of their job.
Yeah. The Arctic is... God, the Arctic is such a fucked up topic.
Canada's Arctic, where Tamarack is the most land back they ever have been about land back.
However, by 1948, it was obvious that the Soviets, that really cool country we became friends with in the war.
Yeah, that we're going to have a forever peace with because we faced a common enemy and truly came together in our mutual humanity.
Yeah. Well, we're not going to be long-term pals with them. And in 1949, Canada became a founding member of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, aka NATO, a group established to be the No Soviets and later Russians Club.
Literally, the unrelated tale, but one of the first things that current and also previous Russian President Vladimir Putin tried to do when assuming power was join NATO.
That's not the first time it happened. It almost happened, and I'm going to bring that up in the next episode.
Well, it wasn't Russia the first time that it happened.
Whatever. Who's the dominant group in the Soviet Union?
That would be the Supreme Soviet, the legislature of all the peoples in the Great Union of Soviet Socialist Republics.
You positive about that one?
Well, I mean, that's not how it says in practice. That's just what it says in the Soviet Constitution I have on my shelf.
This would mean that we were embarking on the Cold War, and one of the reasons one of the reasons why Canada was not aligned with the Soviets actually has to do with the Igor Gozhenko affair, which is a lengthy topic, not for this episode, but to put it lightly, there's an incident that happens in Ottawa that reveals an entire Soviet spying ring. It just became out in the open, and
long story short, we almost became a neutral party in the Cold War, except for the fact that our previous neutral stance ended up with us being heavily infiltrated by spies on all sides, but the Soviets got caught first.
Yeah, the Igor Gozhenko affair is something worth talking about, and then I might find an excuse to talk about it at some point. And of course, this means that this episode is over, and we have to wait until the next time to talk about the Cold War and why we went out of our way to build an intercepting aircraft to take on the Russians. The Soviets.
I gotta keep correcting you on this one.
We know it's the fucking Russians.
It wasn't just the Russians. A disproportionate amount. You might have to cut this due to historical inaccuracy, but I'm pretty sure a disproportionate amount of their air force were actually like non-Russians.
Well, disproportionate of its space program was out in fucking Kazakhstan.
Yeah,
I know this.
And I think the primary base of their air force and their recruiting regime was mostly done out of Ukraine, the Ukrainian SSR.
Was it? I guess it sort of makes sense because Ukraine's terrain is fairly flat, and
a lot of their Russian pilots died in the Second World War.
That's true. Russia really got its ass handed to it.
Very much so.
Yeah, and they're still paying for it today, demographics wise.
Yes, the demography of the demographic results of the Second World War still hitting us today.
Yeah, what are you talking about? It had no impact on geopolitics.
Yeah, the defining moment in basically this unipolar era of American dominance was rooted in the Second World War. Pretty
much. Well, I think that's a podcast for today.
That is a podcast.
We have
what did we learn?
What did we learn? Shit, I forgot to ask that question.
Yeah, that's what we learned. We learned nothing. This is the middle episode. The learnings will be next episode. That's where we learn things.
We learned that you can turn beaches into DC ports, which has nothing to do with the Avro Arrow. Yeah, so next episode will be on the Avro Arrow. We didn't even discuss in the last episode what the next episode would be, but that's because we're just going to be talking. Wait, we did. We actually we're finally going to talk about why we got a Defen bunker.
Yes, the next episode for realsies is about the time where Canada kind of did Vault-Tec from Fallout.
Christ. All right, well, goodbye, everybody.
Bye. Shawinigan Moments is written and recorded on the unceded territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, Stolo, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations in what is otherwise called Vancouver.